Sibel, and now for the fun stuff, the analysis. So, I looked at the top 100 companies at a list from Børsen, who has a top 1,000 sort, and it was indexed by number of employees. Since it was from the Børsen top 1,000 list, it also means that it's differentiated from, it's not a total list of top 100 biggest companies, Danish companies, or biggest companies in Denmark, but it has a lot of the very important players on it. And most representatives are very interesting in this analysis, so it's still rather interesting to use. The parameters we used for the analysis were pretty much the one question: is there a personal story present? And then we asked it at the landing page of the .com, at the job and career section, and at the about us section, all being the most relevant section for any users when they encounter the .com site. And then we also touched on some external touch points. Does the corporate site have social media sites, campaign sites that are visible or close that we see and are referred to? Do they have online advertisement or general content like that? And then asking the same question, is there any personal story present? We also looked at the visual part. Do the corporate sites use any visual elements or content to display or to communicate some of these personal stories or personal identities behind the corporate at each of the sections? The way we ranked it, in order to sort of rank these companies, we needed a system or a score system. So we made a score of 1 to 5, where 1 being not present, and each of the scores had several more detailed information or characteristics regarding the communication style, the content on the .com. 1 definitely not being the best score. 2, very little presence, where number 1 could be given to a .com site both because it had no personal content whatsoever. A few of them actually also didn't even have a .com site, no corporate site. Number 2 would be there is maybe a social media icon or a photo, but it doesn't give any relevance or meaning for me as a user. I don't feel like it's connected to the company. 3, the most tricky and also maybe most interesting one, present but not convincing, because we actually did see that a lot of the companies tried to use photos, videos, as Mikkel mentioned. They have some statements, they might even have quotes, but it's just not convincing. It has corporate written all over it. This is of course also what you're thinking the most subjective one. Having looked at almost 200 corporate sites, I think most of you would probably agree with me anyway. It's very clear when you see the photo that's almost the same as from the other corporate site, representing something totally different, that it's just not personal communication. But it's there, and it's clear that some corporate communicator probably had the feeling that this should be there. There's something to this personal telling. 4 and 5, definitely better scores at this point, where the corporate sites show some sort of recognition of importance of presence. They have content that seems real, that seems personal. The difference here is mainly, does it function as a supporting content, or does it actually come above corporate information? Does it maybe even help to support the corporate information? Is it a employee or a personal story told by a relation to the company that supports our feeling of the company, or vice versa? Both, of course, decent scores on the way. So, to some of the conclusions or results. At the landing pages, we saw very few spikes at the 5, very few examples out of the 100 companies that actually did have this number 4 or 5 in their personal presence. Almost 50%, if not 50% of them, had between no presence at all and very little presence, which is close to no presence. A few had between, the second biggest part of the companies were between 1 and 2, 2.5, which is an average of present but not convincing, or a little bit below that even. At the About Us section, it shifts a little bit. We see that and it's pretty much the same for the personal and the visual storytelling. A few spikes in the visual. There is actually used a few more videos sometimes to try and tell a story. Not that many though. We can see that the bigger portion this time is in the between right around 2, so the score 2 present, very little presence, and especially in the visual, they're moving towards present but not quite convincing. That's the bigger part now. It means that we've chosen to focus our About Us content a little bit more on the personal identity or personal stories behind the company. Interesting, but none of them are now at the 10. We don't have any, or a total of 10, we don't have any 5s at this point. In the job and career section, we found clearly it's changed a bit. Now we're getting even deeper in. It's interesting actually that in the job and career section, in some corporate sites, this was on the same level as the About Us page, but in a lot of them it was actually below this as a sub-link or sub-page on the About Us, which also means that you're asking your customers or your users to navigate more, to find even a little bit more personal content. We have a much bigger section now at the score 3, and a little bit bigger on the 4 as well, but mostly on 3, which were the present but not convincing. So an indicator that there might be some corporate communication people out there who thinks that this is important or might even see a need for it, but they just aren't able to implement it yet, at least according to us. When we looked at the external touch points, a few insights from that were, here it was a little bit different. When we looked only on the score 4 or 5, meaning clear presence or strong presence as either supporting or more or less carrying the corporate identity, Facebook had 35% within the score of 4 or 5, and LinkedIn 21, and other like campaign sites, classic, or external sites, more other social media sites, they had 19%. So this is almost, for Facebook's case, it's 1 out of 3 of the companies that we investigated that were very aware of their personal presence on social media. And just to compare quickly, you can see I don't know if you can see in the back, but the 3 initial steps there are the corporate site average. It's the landing page About Us and career points that are made, and then the last are all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, that we went through. Instagram being the only one not quite utilized yet by many, but otherwise it's quite clear to see that in average social media does carry a lot more personal relation to its users, and the corporate sites actually do use it more than they use their especially landing page About Us. The career page is on its way, but also much deeper in the hierarchy. And then as a little detail, just because we noticed it, out of all the 100 sites we checked, 12% are responsive. So that's also a little a little detail when, for instance, communicating through the social media or other channels where you refer the users amongst many different platforms. This might be a thing to remember. As Mikkel also mentioned, the conclusion of all of this were that personal storytelling is in generally not really used at these corporate sites. It doesn't carry that much weight. Those places where it does, it's just not convincing yet. It's very staged or has the feeling of staged, and it's not really getting through as a corporate identity tool. At the same time, you dig and you shall find. It is there. We seem to have at least the potential in placing the personal communication and the personal stories, because as we saw, there were a growth in the presence of it when we went deeper into the site. And in the end, we saw that it's actually already there. There are a lot of the corporate sites that uses personal relations and stories on their social media sites or campaign sites. So the potential might be there.